I don't know what's waiting on me in the future. Just don't know. I don't know what I'll be doing 10 years from now. Just don't know. But I believe I'll be singing or teaching God's holy word. Oh, it's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Now it's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Oh,
I'll be serving the Lord.
I'm a girl. You probably baby. I stay on it. Find my way. Sometimes my words get so heavy. Can't stop having sleep at night. Don't believe, but I believe. If I keep holding on, God gon' come to me and keep me strong. Oh, it's hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Oh,
I'll be serving the Lord.
I've been singing all the time. God don't give up. I made up mine. I don't treat it like a so-called friend. If I had another chance, I'd put all in. It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Oh,
I'll be serving the Lord.
I've been saying all the time. God don't give up. I gotta made up mine. I don't treat it like a so-called friend. If I had another chance, I'd do it all again. It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Reason I sing,
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
reason I pray,
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
reason I mourn.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
It's so hard.
It's in my heart to serve the Lord.
Oh,
I'll be serving the Lord.
Let us pray. God, we thank you for this beautiful day, this beautiful music, this beautiful opportunity to worship you by studying. Thank you for the time you give me this week to reflect on your word, and I hope that it touches these people like it touched me. In Jesus' name, amen. I got to come up with some new preaching drumming jokes. I think we've done it every time, but it's still funny. So I used to watch people die for a living. That's not a joke. My whole existence was in the hospital, and they would just call me when somebody died. I had a pager, and they called me. I called the nurse, and they said, "Oh, we need a chaplain in room 2031. Miss Jenkins is passing away." And so it didn't matter where I was in the hospital. I had to go directly to that room. And I'd come in and try to imagine, you don't know these aren't church members. You don't know these people. You walk in, they kind of know you're the chaplain because they made you wear a tie. And you walk in, I'm Chaplain Eason, okay, and within a couple minutes, awkwardly, you're kind of supposed to say, "Would we like to pray?" And they say, "Well, yeah, of course." Most of them do. And so you get up there, and imagine standing in a circle with a bunch of strangers and praying. You don't know what's going on. You don't know this woman. And we start praying, "God, please help Mary." And somebody nudges you like, "It's Jane, it's Jane." Help Jane and her family as she deals with this cancer. And somebody nudges you again. It's heart issues. It's heart issues. it can be extremely awkward. So I was in this setting for about 1.5 years in Charleston, and if you've been in an ICU room, which I know most of us have, it's not a place of dignity if you're going to die. I mean, they keep it clean, but it sounds like a Las Vegas casino. There's beeps going at different intervals and different tones, and a breath machine, and all these different tones, and we're trying to pray, you know. So this is what I did, but oftentimes, this is the first call out of many. So you get one, and Miss Jenkins was going to pass, but she made it. Okay, good. So they put the tube back down her throat, she's back in a coma, and at this point, we're sure that within the next day or week, she's going to die. And this is when we learn about families, and what happens to families as someone is dying actively. And you'd have thought Miss Jenkins won the Powerball lottery, because she had people coming from all over the place, out of the woodwork, into the life of this hospital, and I got to meet these people, one by one. But what do you think that this is about? These family members, yeah, they love her. But in this case, and in so many cases, when people are about to die, people come out of the woodwork in your family for what?
Money.
For money. Well, in the Old Testament, they call it blessings. Joseph gives his blessing at the end, but this is passing along the money. It's the will. And it's predictable. So you meet the people in the room I'm praying with. At this point, they're your friends, because they're actually there with Miss Jenkins when she was hurting. These are the people that take her to her appointments, her hair appointments, get her prescriptions filled. You know these people in your lives, or maybe you're that person for somebody else. You're with her all the time, and you should get all the credit. So I walk in and meet those people, but then the scene changes to the ICU waiting room area, because you can't stay in the ICU room the whole time, right? And then people start showing up. Oh, this is her brother Jerry from Michigan. Nice to meet you, Jerry. Oh, this is her sister Michelle. She's from Georgia. Oh, nice to meet you. And I think everything's fine, but I've met this family now, and they leave the room, and they're like, Chad, listen, Jerry hasn't been around in about 10 years, just so you know. And I mean, Miss Jenkins had cancer. They didn't call her. Her daughter died. They didn't come to the funeral. So I get all the gossip, okay? Because I'm the pastor in the situation. And so it becomes apparent to me, not just from the Jenkins, but so many other families, that this is about inheritance. This is about getting your blessing at the end. And so we say families come together in times of crisis, but for different reasons. And so what happens, unfortunately, when Miss Jenkins finally does pass away? And I'm glad that this happens away from the hospital, because this is when, and probably in your family too, the brothers and the sisters start quarreling over who gets what. And cousins, and twice removed cousins, you got cousin Pete and Larry twice removed, they're showing up, and all these children that you hadn't seen before. And when Miss Jenkins was on earth, we realized she's the glue holding this mess together. And everybody was remaining civil in the hospital just to get through it. So I'm praying with all these people I thought got along, they didn't. My question is, how often do we make peace with family members or co-workers or church members because there's a larger presence that looms over that situation? And I mean, I'm not going to tell mom to shut up. That'll kill me, right? I'm not going to slap a co-worker because I don't know where my boss is, but the idea of the boss is in your head. I'm not going to slap anybody. When you come to church, I know there's people you don't like here, but you would never say anything about it. Lightning will strike you dead. Or Leon will step in. Now, Jacob, okay, for the Old Testament lesson, Jacob is who we call Israel, okay? Don't be confused. Jacob dies. This Israel dies. He's Miss Jenkins, okay, from Genesis 50. Joseph is the son, okay? And if you'll remember, at the beginning of this story, his brothers, after Joseph has this dream with a meal in front of him, Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt. That's not a good thing for Joseph, in case you're wondering. Jacob thought Joseph was dead a long time ago. And the brothers didn't care. They sold him into slavery, never to see him again. But something strange and amazing happens in this story. That's why it's in the Bible, I guess. Joseph, rises up in the Egyptian government. He's a Hebrew. This is rare. He rises up in the Egyptian government to be a personal advisor to Pharaoh, okay? And Joseph doesn't know where his brothers are, his father is, but he's kind of like an orphan who's got something to prove. I mean, he does well in Egypt for himself. But then, there's famine. There's famine in the land where his brothers live. And so I know we have a harvest sign, and we've been talking a lot about harvest, but let's talk about famine today. Harvest is quite different, because you have to assume some things, like it's going to rain, maybe, or that the soil's fertile. Sometimes it's just not going to happen. And in famine, you have to act out of fear to make sure your basic needs are met. And so Joseph's brothers go to Egypt, which is on the Nile bank, remember, and there is some fertile land there, no matter what. So they have to go beg in Egypt for food to bring back to their family. And as the reader, the third person, we know this ironic situation. We see that Joseph is in Egypt, doing well, his brothers need food, and we see them come together. His brothers have to beg Joseph, who they sold into slavery. They have to beg him for food. They don't recognize him. So I want to say, and you may want to say, yes, Joseph, like, justice is done. You sold this boy into slavery as a young kid. He gets older. He's done well. Now you're begging at his feet. Throw him into jail. Starve him. Payback. God is justice, right? Well, that's not what happens. That's not what happens. Joseph forgives his brothers.
Amen.
He not only that, he gives them food and money and land, and brings all his brothers. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob's Israel, he has sons. All these other boys, the 12 tribes of Israel, named after these boys, they all come with all their generations to a little town called Goshen outside of Egypt. And he sets them up.
All right.
Okay? So while Jacob is still alive, the father, Joseph's pretty nice to his brothers. We can all agree, right? Forgiving, generous. But what we see in today's text is some unsettled brothers after Jacob dies. They ask something very interesting. They say, and I'm quoting, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in all for all the wrong we did to him?" They're selling into slavery. Yeah, they should be worried. The dad is gone. And people point to this translation of this Hebrew, and they say, in this case, it's actually that the brothers want Joseph to have some sort of retribution or payback, the way that the word is used. Because imagine, you can understand, sometimes in your life you hope for punishment on yourself because of something you've done. It's like karma that you kind of just wish would go ahead and happen so we can get this over with. That's what the brothers are saying. They know they did evil. Their brother's acting pretty funny, considering he's given them stuff, brought them all into the same land, fed them, and Joseph dies, and they're going, anybody else worried about this? Okay, put yourself in the brothers' shoes, okay? The brothers are carrying guilt. Just bottom line, they're carrying guilt. So how humiliating must it have been to beg at your brother's feet? You know people have given you stuff before, and you thank him for it, but you also feel ashamed. Like you're not good enough. And so they have to go beg at their brother's feet. He keeps being nice to them, and they're wondering, is he just doing this on the surface, like in the hospital room ICU, just to please everybody until this is all over? And so in our hearts, we wish the burden could be taken away with justice on ourselves. And now that they have this reason to be afraid, the brothers get together and they approach Joseph. And they go up and they say, look, I don't know if you know this. You can read this in the text. It doesn't say it anywhere. It says, look, I don't know if you know this, but Dad said you need to forgive us. Dad said. Now Dad is dead at this point. And they have conspired to go talk to Joseph and tell him that Dad said this. So I find this funny. He said, look, I don't know. Well, Dad said you need to forgive us, okay? So here's where God comes into this story. Because before, this is just a broken up ICU room with a bunch of wacky family members. Joseph says to his brothers, don't be afraid. Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good. Hear that again. Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good. Amen. And we carry that with us somewhere. You mean to tell me you're showing up in the ICU when Mom dies and we haven't seen you in 10 years? You went home, Brother Jerry, Michelle, Cousin Pete, second cousin Larry. You have been absent from this woman's life You've been ignorant to her suffering and her cancer and all the things she's gone through. You have been selfish that you would show up in a hospital room to gain some sort of inheritance. You know what? You know what? What you intended for harm, God intended for good. And so sometimes we should give praise when our families are brought together in death and tragedy. Because some of these arguments that we need to have happen, and some of that healing happens. Maybe in the ICU, those people flying in, maybe that works out for the best, despite the arguments. At least we're in the same room. It helps us, and this is a big key for today, it helps us find meaning in our suffering. In our suffering. Emphasis on the family. Now that's an interesting subject. We've been talking about harvest. I told you earlier, we're assuming that there's some fertile field. Fields aren't always fertile. The soil sometimes just won't grow. It just won't rain. The sun just won't come out. And so what happens in times in our lives that we've all had, when we are in famine, when there is great suffering that we cannot avoid, maybe you've lost a job. It's going to take a while to get another one. Maybe you can't afford the medication for what you're going through that you really need. Maybe we can't figure out why the pews aren't full for a long time. And we just keep wondering, but we are just in a place of famine and suffering. And so during these times, we are forced into, and I know everybody can relate to this, we're forced into this repentance, where we say stuff like this: God, if you'll just get me out of this, I'll do whatever you want. You might have said that before? Me too, that's why I'm up here. Not a joke. I mean, we pray for hurricanes to miss us. Do you realize the irony of this? What does that mean? Not for the hurricane to stop. No, it's going to hit somebody else. Don't pray for a hurricane to miss you. Pray for the winds to calm down. It means that somebody else is going to suffer. It's just inevitable. And so, if we're going to suffer, and we've decided it's inevitable at times in our life, we can't always be in the harvest. We have to find meaning in the suffering, while we're suffering. Like, I lost my job, and I got strung out on alcohol, and my kids got turned over to DSS, but I tell you what, if I didn't have that time of suffering, I would not be stronger today. We hear stuff like that. They say, oh, well, the church went through a time of suffering, and attendance was down, and money was tight. Oh, but thank God we went through that time of suffering. Because now, we're doing great. And I needed that suffering to happen, right? That's a bunch of bull. No, it is. Because when we are in the middle of suffering, we're not saying stuff like that. When we're in the middle of it, I hate every second of it. I don't like not eating. I don't like not having a job. I don't like having people not in the pews. I don't like paying more money for things. I don't like being sick. I hate how people can't be Clemson. That's for you, we cannot find meaning in suffering. We're not good at that. We find it, we'll write it down, we'll teach it to you later in Sunday school, we'll look back on the story and it'll be clear, okay? And we do this with Joseph because he's sold into slavery. Like I said, he's a Hebrew, he's despised, but he still rises up. He's confronted by his enemy, okay? We know it's the brothers. And we learn about God here. Because instead of bringing the brothers to justice, he forgives them. Now, we can see the whole story and understand, but imagine being Joseph during all that time, having been sold into slavery, having to climb the ranks in a foreign land, to be able to forgive your brothers. The power that we see. Now we understand, God, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And so can we look at our situation, Oak Grove, and say, you know what? Maybe we are in suffering. All right? This is how we see Jesus. The whole story. Carpenter from Nazareth, this man goes around healing people, right? Telling short parables that everybody seems to understand. He tells everybody he's the Son of Man. This is crazy. If somebody did this today, they'd be crazy. We don't make meaning of Jesus' life until he suffers. And not only just do we have to get through the suffering, we got to get through the resurrection. It's only after the resurrection do we go, whoa. What was that guy teaching while he was here? Let's go look at that. And so we get meaning in Jesus' teachings after the death. Had he not come back, I don't think he'd be on some self-help aisle at Barnes & Noble. We wouldn't have it in the Bible. It would just be kind words about some things. But in the resurrection and the suffering, we get that was special, and this teaching is special. And so we start to understand, all right, now I understand forgiveness that's coming from God. Okay, Joseph shouldn't have forgiven his brothers. That's ridiculous, but he did. Okay, so now we're dealing with crazy, undeserved forgiveness. What is that? Because we don't understand the extent. If we don't understand the extent of what Joseph went through, we can't understand the depth of the forgiveness that he was given. I got news for you. If my sister sold me into slavery, I am not giving them money at Thanksgiving dinner. Okay? In today's reading from the Gospel of Matthew, Peter, who's always asking questions, Peter asked Jesus, and this is something I'd ask and you'd ask. He said, well, Jesus, this forgiveness thing, all right, let's just say that someone in the church, a brother, a neighbor, sins against me over and over. I mean, they won't stop sinning against me. How many times am I supposed to forgive them? Like 7? 7? Is that enough times? Don't get caught up in the math here. 7's a number of completion. He's just saying, like, is there a limit? And Jesus says, Peter, try like infinity. Infinity times. That's what 77 means. Infinity times. There is no limit to it. And so Peter's asking, is there a limit on how many times I need to forgive? Jesus says, infinity times. Like infinity times, Peter. There's no limits to the forgiveness. And then he tells this parable about the unforgiving servant to teach him a lesson. A king forgave a debt. 10,000 talents is worth 20 years of labor. Okay, 20 years for a regular worker at the time. He forgives a guy, okay? God walks out the door, okay, sees somebody that owes him money. He owes him 100 denarii. That is 3 months' wages. Okay? 20 years of work. He walks out the door. He's mad because somebody owes him 3 months. Yes. So he gets called back in. And I mean, I'm thinking, and we thought even during the children's sermon, what a scumbag. Like you just got this huge debt paid for you, and you walk out the door and you're roughing somebody up. But it's everywhere in the Bible, and we don't follow it. To whom much is given, much is required. You heard that before? Luke 12:48. In our Lord's Prayer. We say it every Sunday, right? Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Amen. You forgive us. And so I'm supposed to go out and forgive somebody else. That is how the Christian thing works. There is no tree of enlightenment in our religion, guys. It's different. There's no search for inner peace that we're trying to attain some higher plane of knowledge than those around us. That's not what this is about. The Christian thing is about forgiveness and love your neighbor. Hard stop. That's it. I just finished Unbroken. Has anybody read that book or seen that movie? Am I talking? Okay. It's a true story about Louis Zamperini. He was an Olympic milist who, right before World War II, he was the best mile runner in the country. He joins the Air Force, ends up at World War II. Okay, doesn't get to the Olympics because of that. In fact, they got canceled. Short story is, he's a bombardier, and their plane goes down in the Pacific. And he is on a raft for 47 days. That's still a record. Him and his buddy survived on a raft for 47 days. Birds would land on the raft, they would literally kill the bird and eat it off. Sorry, kids. He survived for 47 days, only to run into a Japanese boat and become a prisoner of war. He wakes up and goes, buddy, I got good news, I got bad news. So he becomes a prisoner of war and becomes the point. There's this guy named Wanatami, okay? They call him the Bird, and he's an infamous prisoner of war officer. He tortures and does things to men that he should have been put to death for, but somehow avoided. And you got to see the movie if you don't have time to read the book. But in the early part of Louis Zamperini's suffering, which is unbelievable, he tells God what we said earlier. He says, God, if you get me through this, I'll do whatever you want. Well, he did. And after Hiroshima happened, World War II ends, Zamperini goes back to America and is converted at a Billy Graham rally, nonetheless. And at the end of the movie, though, I loved what this text pops up on the screen. I didn't know there was a faith element to this movie at all. I just thought, hey, you guys survived, that's amazing. But at the end, it goes, motivated by faith, Louis came to see that the way forward was not revenge, but forgiveness. I cried. And not only that, Louis goes back to Japan and has a meeting with all the officers that torture him. I'm talking cleaning excrement out of toilets. I'm talking about carrying loads of coal for 20 hours a day, beaten, starved, diseased, rats, you name it. And he goes and forgives them. He goes to Japan. And the final scene of the movie, it's the real Zamperini. He's about 85 years old. He's got a tracksuit on, and he's carrying a torch. And I'm thinking, oh man, that's great. They must have put him in the 96 Olympics in Atlanta, right? And it says at the bottom of the screen, Louis Zamperini did realize his dream of running in the Olympics. ... in Tokyo. He ran the torch for the Olympics in Tokyo. What kind of forgiveness is that for the atrocities this man had on his life? Torture. Sell him into slavery, make me clean excrement from a wooden toilet. How can you suffer through this stuff and still have the strength to forgive? The point of this is we have to see God's work in the suffering, during the suffering. Because Joseph, he had it all along. From the time he got sold into slavery, he carried God's hand with him all the way until his brothers showed up at that doorstep. And Zamperini, having been on that plane wreck and on that raft and being a POW for 2 years, everybody thought he was dead, being whipped and beaten and made fun of. That's who he was. He saw God's purpose in his suffering so that if he got home, he knew he had a bond already. He told God, if you get me through this, I promise, I'll just serve you, whatever you need me to do. I did that in Greenville on a band trip before I quit the band and became a pastor. Under a table, sleeping in a sleeping bag. I didn't want to be there. That's why I'm here today. Can we recognize God's will in our lives in the suffering? And I was interviewed for Broad River Chaplaincy. And they asked me, do you think there's an appropriate time for capital punishment? Death sentence. Because we're going to be in the room with them, and whether you agree with it or not, I need to know how you feel about it. So I answered the boss like this. I answered like an unforgiving servant, I'll tell you that. I said, yeah, I guess in the right case, in limited conditions, I think the death penalty is fair for certain crimes. And I was thinking about, what if somebody, killed my babies, my wife? Yeah, put them to death. I was like Peter. I wanted there to be a set number on the right amount of forgiveness before I wanted all hell to rain fire on this guy. So I had to tell my boss, yeah, I guess I'd forgive the guy for a few things, but if they're outside those parameters, is that the correct answer? Remember, I'm in an interview at this point. Is that the correct answer? No. That's what Peter's saying. Is that right, Jesus? Like 7 times? Is that enough? Try infinity. Infinity times, Eason. That's how many times you have to forgive. Jesus is saying, I granted you the greatest forgiveness on earth. All your sins, because I suffered. I suffered so you might understand what I'm taught while I was here. And so all I need you to do, Eason, is go out and teach the good news I wrote down, that somebody else wrote down, and I forgive you more than 20 years of work. And you can't even go out and forgive a neighbor for a few weeks' wages. You unforgiving servant. And sometimes we have to suffer, and we have to learn to forgive, and sometimes we have to read about others that suffer, because their stories are so incredible. Joseph's story is incredible. And so at the end of it, we can go, God, now I understand forgiveness. Zamperini, now I get it. We read Jesus' whole story. We can't believe that a man could forgive people for what he did to him that day before the cross. The Charleston church shootings a couple years ago. In the courtroom, these families are forgiven Dylan Root. Are you kidding me? And did you see the power that had on the country? You know what that's called? Grace. That's what happens when you're on the receiving end of something you do not deserve. There's no two ways about it. You don't deserve it. Joseph's brothers didn't deserve it. Those Japanese prisoner war officers, they didn't deserve it. Those people that hung Jesus, put him on the cross, they didn't deserve it. You don't deserve it. It's free. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.